Hello and welcome to Ditto Dat 1927 flood here on Tuesday, March 24th. Hope you're having a good day. Got a little intro to do here and then we're going to get right into it. Got a whole lot to do. So let's start with our message of the day. Start a project. Start a project. One project that I have started is I started this right here, Ditto Dat. You can see I'm up to the O. I have a bunch of projects that I've started. Um, so that is my recommendation if you've got some time, which I imagine you do. There's tons of things you can do. You can learn how to cook, learn how to play an instrument. You can start drawing. You can do a short story series. You can write if these times are really difficult right now. A great thing to do is to write about it and sort of get it out. Um, so start a project. Please let me know what projects you have already started or are starting. I'd love to hear about it. And if you can't think of a project, let me know. I have a unique skill in thinking of an endless amount of projects. It's almost a problem. Blessed with a burden, some would say. All right, second thing. There's been another colored pencil discovered by me just a few hours ago. So I'll take you to the scene. I don't want to call it a crime scene, but I definitely feel like there's some clues that Ditto is giving us. So let's go take a look. There's that guy. What's up, buddy? Okay, so dark chocolate. Fascinating. Fascinating. So let's see if there's any teeth marks on this one. No teeth marks. A little something going on the tip there, actually. Anyway, so we got harvest, gold harvest, and dark chocolate. These two colors do go well together. So sort of Saints colors, actually. Anyways, that story will continue to develop. The mystery of the colored pencils. I mentioned that I was going to product place this notebook. So amazing. It's a Midori notebook, very soft paper with one of these pens. What a joy. So that's our product placement for today. And I also want to mention if it would be easier for you to have just the packets, we are offering packets to be picked up at school. They are available. You need to let Mr. Richard or me know that you're coming to pick them up and we can arrange that. But right in the front office, there are a stack of packets from each of your teachers. And if that would be easier for you, please let me know and we will make that happen. Because I understand that some of you might only have one computer in the house and you guys are struggling for screen time with your parents and siblings who are also um, going through this. So if you want packets, let me know and I'll make that happen. Okay. Want to point out the timeline and then we're going to get right into it. So let's get the timeline out. Something I forgot to mention last time, Blubancha. Let's not forget about Blubancha. And then let's take a look at where we're going on the timeline right here. 1927 flood. That's what we're going to be focusing on for today. All right, we are back. Let's see if I got this up. Boom, there we go. All right. Um, so 1927 Great Flood. We're going to get into it. I've been nerding out for the past few days about the 1927 Great Flood. I had to finally just stop myself so I could make this video because I could have just kept going. I also want to add there's a playlist because there's a lot of music, specifically blues and gospel, that were inspired by this event, the Great Flood. And so I've added that to my YouTube channel as well. So 1927 Great Flood. Highly recommend listening to it. It's really good. Um, so yeah, there was a saying that if it keeps on raining, that levee's gonna break. The lyrics in a lot of the songs, and you can see it here on this front page. But as we know, historically, it's totally natural for the Mississippi River to flood. It's happened many, many, many times over the course of history. And it wasn't until recently that humans got involved and have attempted to, mostly successfully, to stop the Mississippi River from flooding through various ways. And that's what we're going to get into today. All right. What you need for this lesson: a pen or pencil, your notebook. You could go all digital too if you want, that's possible. You want to have these links up. So you want to click on this one, the Google Doc, the slide. This is literally the slide right now. So if you're seeing this on your screen, um, you've already clicked on this, or it's the YouTube video, whatever. Vimeo, there's a video we're going to watch. This is a podcast. This is a super amazing article. It was written last week, and it's really fascinating. So get that up as well. I'll be referencing this. And your paddle. If you have your paddle, please bring it. I got mine right behind me, as you can see. All right, let's hit that do now. All right, number one. All right, you get your notebook up, and all right, I'll wait for you. And your pencil. Okay. All right, number one. How does Louisiana deal with the Mississippi when there is a risk of a flood? Think about that field trip we went on. Number two, what time of year is the Mississippi most likely to flood and why? Number three, if there is a great flood, what part of Louisiana should be flooded? Remember, the water has to go somewhere. And number four, please draw a picture related to number three. So go ahead and answer those, and then don't press play until you've answered them. Okay, we're back. Ditto, come on, I need to share some answers with you. Ditto's coming. Okay, so Ditto, number one, how does Louisiana deal with the Mississippi River when there's a risk of flood? Well, we have spillways. We have the Morganza spillway and we have the Bonnie Carey spillway. Okay. Number two, what time of year is the Mississippi most likely to flood and why? April, May, right now. And why? Because of the snow melting upriver. So even though there's rain down here, and that affects the Mississippi a little bit, it's mostly from the snow melt and the rain up north and all the tributaries. So on. What part of Louisiana should be flooded? I'm going to hold off on that. That is our guiding question today. So we'll be coming back to that. And I want you to develop your own opinion. And perhaps I'll share mine at the end. But I want to make sure that you develop your own opinion first. Okay? Rally Robin. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Remember, Rally Robin, we go back and forth. We're going to list as many rivers in Louisiana as you can. You got a Google Hangout going on, hit that pause and do it with your friends, or you can do it with me right now. So I'm going to say river, then you say river. I say river, you say river. I say river, you say river. Ditto. I don't know where Ditto went. Makes me nervous when he's in another room. Okay, so I'll go first. Pearl. Sabine. Chafuncta. Red. Mississippi. You probably said that already. Calcasieu. Washita. Black. All right. Hopefully you did good on that rally, Robin. Today's vocab. We have a coffer. I should say one. I'll fix that. A place one keeps their money, like a treasure chest. That's a coffer. That was a new word for me. Gotta look that one up. Board of liquidation. The people in New Orleans government in charge of money. The board of liquidation controls the coffers. So essentially, the people in New Orleans, there's 9 of them who control the money. We still have a board of liquidations, 9 people, including our mayor. So they control the disbursement of money. The wood screw pump, a low lift axial flow drainage pump designed by A. Baldwin Wood. I just learned his name. I think it's Alex. A. Baldwin Wood in 1913 to cope with the drainage problems of New Orleans. This is a really interesting thing. So his last name is Wood, so it's called a wood screw pump. There's actually no wood in the pump, and that's confusing. So it's called a wood screw pump because of his last name. And then finally, subsidence, which I'm hoping you learned in Miss Marshall's class. If not, that may be coming up in her class, but we're also doing it. Because remember, science and social studies cross over, just like math, just like English, they're all crossing over. The gradual caving in or sinking of an area of land, subsidence. Okay, make sure you've written these down in your notebook. These words will be coming up. And remember, in your writing, you want to use these words as much as possible when it is applicable. Okay, so make sure we're using these words today in your answers. So, one of the fascinating things about learning about history is a lot of times you are learning about today. There were several things that came up in my research for this lesson that I was just like, wow, we're going through this again in a slightly different way. Um, so, one of the quotes from the video is that New Orleans was the most unsanitary city in the US. This is from like 100 plus years ago. Um, I don't know if you guys saw the video of the rats in the French Quarter recently, um, but there's still some truth to this quote. I'll just put it that way. Um, Misinformation, there's a lot of misinformation going around. That was also true in our previous lesson with Huey P. Long, um, and just people falsely stating things as if they're facts when they're not. So that's also going to be part of today's lesson. And then, very relevant, especially in the past couple of days, chaos is bad for business. Um, you may or may not know that there's a movement to get people to get businesses back open as soon as possible, and as early as 2 weeks, it has been mentioned. Um, and that made me think of this quote that also came from the video that we're going to watch. Chaos is bad for business. So even though we're learning about something that's almost 100 years ago, there's still a lot of connections to today. Turn and talk. What part of Louisiana should be flooded in a great flood? Okay. Hopefully at this point you've answered that question. If not, hit pause and go ahead and do that. I'm going to have a short answer for that to Ditto. So Ditto, did you know, Ditto, that there's a place in Louisiana called Waterproof? Do you think that should be the place that's flooded? Ditto said that's not fair. So, true story, look it up. There is a place called Waterproof. But ultimately, at the end of class today, you are going to have to answer this question. So, what part of Louisiana should be flooded in a great flood, in the times of a great flood? If you were a leader in charge, where would you flood the Mississippi and why? You need to explain why are you doing that specific place. Um, so, we'll come back to this question later. All right. So, this is a map of, and I hope you guys can see my arrow over here, the 1927 flood. And you'll note this is a natural flood. The, the levees broke naturally with one exception, which I'll point out in just a moment. So you can see up and down the Mississippi, there was flooding. This is right by the Atchafalaya, just like we had talked about earlier in the school year, that the Mississippi, if it were up to the Mississippi, it would already have switched over to the Atchafalaya River. And here's a great example of how that could happen. And you can also see up and down though the Mississippi, all the way over here into Monroe, like central Louisiana, there was flooding. In a little bit on to the eastern side of the Mississippi into the state of Mississippi. But I want to also point out for that final question, it is not an option to flood Mississippi, the state of Mississippi. The question is, what part of Louisiana would you flood? And you can just see here naturally, this is where the natural flood is. Notice that Baton Rouge was okay, barely, barely okay. And that New Orleans did have some flooding here, but just south, and this is what I was talking about, unnatural flooding. This was actually, there was dynamite that was exploded here in St. Bernard and Plaquemines Parish, and they flooded on both sides of the river. We'll be seeing that in the video as well. This was done to protect New Orleans, and I'll let the video explain that. But I just wanted to show you that. And then on this side, you can see just up and down in Illinois, as far north as Illinois, and I even think, yeah, it was Missouri, Illinois, up and down the Mississippi River, there was flooding. This was a massive, massive flood that affected a large part of the United States. I'm going to be talking a lot about maps today. You know how I love maps. Maps, maps, maps. Bonnie Carey Spillway. So you remember that we went to the Bonnie Carey Spillway and it looked like this, dry. Also, side note, does anyone remember what these are? These called needles or toothpicks? For some reason, I want to call them toothpicks. I think they're needles. Those big metal or big wooden things in between. Then you can see here when they open the spillway, this is what it looks like, and it's actually an event that people come out to watch. But this area right here is where we were standing, and that's this area right here. Boom, boom. Okay, so hopefully you're remembering that field trip. It's coming back to you. This is one way that we control the river to avoid something like that. And then here's another map, maps, maps, maps. This is the spillway. So you take this water and you open up the spillway and the water comes from the Mississippi and flows out eventually into the Lake Pontchartrain and then into the Gulf of Mexico. And remember, there's all kinds of problems with that because you're putting fresh water into an area that's brackish or salt water or a mix. That's what brackish means, another vocab. And that is really damaging for our seafood and a lot of the fishes and natural life out there, notably oysters, crabs, shrimps, and dolphins. Remember that awful, awful image of the dolphin that we saw? So there are some really bad consequences when this happens. But remember, the water has to go somewhere. Here are how we are currently controlling the Mississippi River. So this comes from that article, but you can see we got the Morganza Spillway up here. So that's just north of Baton Rouge, and that's there to protect Baton Rouge. Then we got, here's Baton Rouge. The Bonnie Carey Spillway, which is where we went. Remember, the water goes into the lake and then out into the Gulf of Mexico. Then we have New Orleans, and yes, you read the article for 5 and 6. It's really good. Great way to spend 30 minutes is reading that article. Okay, Mr. Cronenberg, go to Louisiana. Okay, so more recap. We're still doing a recap. Go. This is from earlier in the school year. Come on now. There we go. Okay. So, and feel free to look at all the other information if you want to check that out. But this is what I wanted to get to. So here's the flooding of the Atchafalaya, what happens when there's flooding. So it comes over here from the old river structure down into the Atchafalaya River Basin. Okay, this is what it used to look like hundreds of years ago. Then naturally, that's embedded in the river, and then humans got involved. This is the first time humans got involved, and then this, and you see it got all complicated. There's all kinds of ways for the river to come out. So here's the Red River, Mississippi, which also makes me think, is the Red River a tributary to the Atchafalaya and not the Mississippi? I've kind of always wondered that. This is where it does it flows out. Anyways, and remember the Atchafalaya is a distributary because it comes off of the Mississippi River. Distributary. This is what it looks like um, in reality here. So here's that waterway. There's the Mississippi going down. And that's the Morganza spillway. Yay. Okay, I did it. Okay, we're going to go back over here now. So many maps. So many maps. I want to talk about this real quick. So this is a bunch of squiggly lines. What do they mean? Go to the legend. Always go to the legend first, right? Every chart map should have a legend. So in the legend, you can see here in 2019 that that's this one right here. That these are the amount of days we've had this is the river level and the amount of days that have been at a flood stage, what they call a flood stage. And what that article talked about, one of the things is that in the 2019 year, there was 165 days at flood stage. So nearly half of the year, the Mississippi River was at a flood stage. And you remember when we went to the Bonnie Carey spillway, they had talked about how they had opened the spillway more times in the last 2 or 3 years than they had in the entire time that the spillway had been built. And the spillway was built, reminder, because in reaction to the 1927 flood, which we're getting there. Trust me, we're going to get there. So it was built in 1933, and they had opened it, I think, 5 or 6 times in its history until the last few years when it's been opened multiple times because of how high the river is and how frequently been at a flood stage. I asked the engineer, the Army Corps of Engineers, why that is, and he said climate change. We're getting these types of numbers because of climate change. I went to the river yesterday for you, for the children, for research, and it is very high right now. And actually, it is slightly below flood stage. Last week it was at flood stage, but it is March, April, and May are coming, so that it will get to the flood stage, and likely, is a Mr. Cronenberg prediction that the spillway will open probably within the next month, um, based on historical data. Okay. All right. I've done a lot of talking. I looked at maps and got really excited, as I normally do when I see maps. So now it's time to let someone else talk. So this is a podcast, NOLA versus Nature. If you look in your worksheet, there are several questions for you to answer. So please go to the podcast. It's about 12 minutes long. Listen to it. Super fascinating about this wood pump. Also, I love this drawing of the wood pump. It's amazing. Remember, the guy's last name is Wood. That's why it's called the wood pump. It's not actually made out of wood. And also, when you're listening to the podcast, please give it your full attention. Don't do that thing where you're doing something else, one of those projects you're starting, and listening to the podcast. Give it your full attention. Close your eyes if you have to, lie down if you have to, like we do in class sometimes when we're listening to podcasts. So I'm going to pause right now for you and then come back after you've listened to the podcast and you've answered all the questions. Okay, we are back. Great. Hope you enjoyed that. I found that really fascinating. That part, I like when they ask the question: Would the inventor would he what would he think about that they're still using the pumps 100 years later, and how he probably would have invented a new one, a better one. But pretty crazy that we're still using these pumps. Reminds me in August, if you remember in August when we had that flood in at ISL, and we were totally stuck. It happened right before dismissal, and like we were completely stuck and for a couple hours. The exception of some of you who got out got wet. Um, but when there's that much rain in a really short period of time, there's really not much we can do. These pumps are made for, I think they said, half an inch of rain per hour. And so when we get those serious dumps of rain, which are becoming more frequent because of climate change, then we get flooding, which we saw. Remember, we saw the college kids on their surfboards going by. Don't do that. Please don't ever do that. Not a good idea. That water's nasty. All right. And also, you can see that most of Louisiana was a swamp until these pumps came along and drained out this area. So it's very likely where you are living today, right now, where you are, was a swamp, a cypress, wet, muddy swamp. Unless you live right next to the river, or there's a couple of terraces. There's an Esplanade Ridge right here. There's Bayou St. John right on there. Or this is actually called Gentilly Trace. So Gentilly out into New Orleans east a little bit even. That that was also elevated land, but for the most part, swamp, swamp, swamp. And so we drained it, and it's no surprise that it floods. Also, subsidence. Um, the land has been sinking more and more. This should be one of your disadvantages of the pump, is that the land has been sinking more and creating these bowls, and that's why when it rains, we get so much flooding. Remember, this is a floodplain. It's naturally been flooding for thousands of years. All right. So here's some images from the 1927 flood. These are people who were displaced without homes. So one of the things also that's still true today is that areas that flood are more likely to flood. Um, you have more low income populations there. And here's a picture where these were people who were sharecroppers. So this is post-slavery, sort of a new form of slavery, um, according to a lot of historians, myself included. And so you can see they're waiting in line for food, and they have these little camps in the back. And then I did want to point this out. So this is going to come up in the video that we're talking about. So you can see just south, here's the Mississippi, just south. This is now in St. Bernard Parish. This was the area that they blew up and flooded. And the idea was that all the water would come out here and lower the Mississippi River so that New Orleans would not flood. I will be coming back to this later. Also, Bonnie Carey Spillway, shout out. Okay, that's it. So what I want you to do right now is watch the film. I believe you're going to start at minute 55, and there's only 12 or 13 minutes. There's a lot of questions you need to answer, a lot of things that are going on. So you need to um, watch that, and then I'll just say a little more after the video, and then that's it. That's all I got for the 1927 flood. Okay, back. Hope you found that interesting. That was the same video that we watched for the Mardi Gras when I did my Mardi Gras unit, so may have seemed familiar. Highly recommend watching all 2 hours of it if you have the time. Could be a project you could start. But this is the area that they were talking about that they flooded. Um, and I really like that image where that first everyone's expecting that big flood, and then like they had that the dynamite explosion, and then nothing happened. And then they had to do it 38 more times, and finally they got it to flood. And much like they had predicted, totally unnecessary. New Orleans was not going to flood because there was already a natural break up here into the Atchafalaya River that saved New Orleans. And also a reminder, New Orleans was flooding like it did in August here just because of local rain, not because of the Mississippi River. All right. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. You know the popcorn's coming momentarily, but I just want to mention, make sure you've completed this entirely. Tomorrow is the Huey P. Long focus, so make sure you've studied up for that, and then I'll give you an update about when the focus for this material will be. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you had a really great day. Hope you learned something today. Please start a project. Tell me about it. And popcorn's coming up next. There we are. Hey, okay, you ready for this? You ready? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're ready. It's exciting. Okay, let's get. I want to do a little. Let's do a little warm up. A little handshake, please. Thank you. Another handshake. Oh, thank you. High five. High five. Oh yeah. Down. Okay. Ready? You ready? Okay. Sit. Let me get one, two. Oh, the jump. I love the jump. Three, four. Oh my goodness. Five. Excellent form. Six, seven. Oh, that counts. He got that. That counts. Eight. Oh, terrible throw. That was my bad. Terrible throw. That happens, but hope you enjoyed. We'll go for more tomorrow. Have a great evening. Bye.